Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover all kinds of supernatural creatures. In this video we're going to be looking at the movie Dead Silence from 2007. This movie is a certified classic in my opinion. It was one of the scariest movies I watched as a kid, and anytime creepy dolls are brought up, I think of this movie. For me, this movie is up there with early 2000s classic horror movies like 1408 and Final Destination. In Dead Silence, we follow the character Jamie Ashen as he tries to uncover the mystery behind the legend of Mary Shaw, a ventriloquist who was killed in the town of Ravens Fair. Let's discover what really happened to Mary Shaw and why the people from Ravens Fair came to fear her so much they wouldn't even speak her name.
Who was it?
I don't know.
The movie begins with us following Jamie Ashen and his wife Lisa. Jamie is played by Ryan Quanten, who also played Jason Stackhouse in True Blood. I made like an hour-long video on that show, so I'm gonna have to fight myself from saying Jason instead of Jamie. Why do their names have to be so similar? Anyway, Lisa and Jamie receive a strange package, and inside is a creepy ventriloquist doll with the name Billy. The doll from Saw was also named Billy, and it was created by the same people, so I guess they just really like dolls named Billy. Jamie has no idea who would have sent the package, and there's no card with it. Lisa says it reminds her of that old ghost story about the woman who had all the dolls. Beware the gaze of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. Something scary. Jamie doesn't fully remember, but it seems to spark something in his memory. They're joking about the doll when suddenly the mouth pops open and they look a little uneasy. Jamie leaves the house to go get some food, and Lisa is alone with the doll. Lisa sits the doll down on the bed, and when she turns around, the doll is now looking at her. She sets Billy back up with a pillow and for some reason puts a sheet over him. Lisa hears something in the living room and thinks it's Jamie, but no one's there. A moment later, the music starts to slow down until it stops. The clock slowly comes to a stop as well. Then the kettle goes silent, even though it's clearly still boiling. It's like she's now separated from the rest of the world. Possibly my favorite part of this scene is Lisa's facial expression as she slowly becomes terrified at what's happening because it's so strange. She walks back into the bedroom where the doll is, and it's sitting under the blanket. She slowly approaches it, and just before she can pull the sheet off, there's a bunch of movement and the sheet is wrapped around her. Then she's thrown across the room, landing with a loud thud. She tries to crawl away while spitting up blood, but something grabs her leg and pulls her into the bedroom. Jamie arrives home with the food soon after, to the kettle boiling away and the music turned up. He calls out for Lisa and she answers, "I'm in here." He can't find her and calls out, "What's going on?" Lisa replies,
I have a surprise for you, Jamie.
When Lisa speaks here, we can hear another voice layered underneath, like it's something trying to copy Lisa's voice. He enters the room and sees blood on the floor and what looks like the doll still set up on the bed under the sheet. Except now, there's a red stain over the mouth. Jamie's freaked out and says this isn't funny, and hears Lisa laugh behind him now.
This is not funny.
He slowly approaches the bed and pulls the sheet off. Underneath is his wife, with her tongue cut out and a horrifying look on her face. He backs up in fear and trips over the doll on the floor behind him. How is he hearing Lisa's voice if she was dead? We immediately cut to the police station and a cop saying, "The weird thing is, there's no defensive marks on Lisa. If someone was trying to carve my face into a jack-o'-lantern, I think I'd fight back." Detective Lipton thinks that Jamie is the one who killed her, since, to him, there's no other option. No matter what Jamie says, we can tell the detective has already made up his mind. Jamie is taken aback that he's a suspect and tells him to look into whoever sent that package to their house the same day his wife was killed. The detective is confused and wants to know what a puppet would have to do with his wife's death. Jamie becomes more saunter now and says, "In the town where I'm from, a ventriloquist dummy, it's a bad omen. It's kind of a local legend, and some people believe that the dummy brings death to those around them." The detective thinks Jamie is insane, and he's never arrested a dummy for murder, but he's arrested quite a few husbands. Jamie reiterates, "You don't think it's weird this package shows up the same day my wife is killed?" The detective responds, "You know what I find weird? You said you heard your wife's voice just moments before you found her, but she didn't have a tongue, and according to you, she was already dead." Yeah, it's not looking great for Jamie. Luckily they have literally no evidence, so he's free to go for now. But we can tell this detective is going to be a thorn in his side from here on out. When Jamie is allowed to leave, he says, "At least I'll have more time to do your job for you."
Boom. Roasted.
If the cops aren't going to help, Jamie will figure out what happened to his wife on his own. He returns to the apartment that's been taped off as a crime scene. He goes inside and finds the doll. then goes back to the case that it arrived in. He doesn't find anything inside, but sees a small rip in the fabric, and there's something underneath. He tears off the rest of the fabric on the inside of the doll case to reveal the name Mary Shaw and Billy in Raven's Fair. Jamie immediately gets in his car with the doll and starts driving. We see him arriving in the town of Raven's Fair, a quiet place to live. We can already put together that Mary Shaw must have been from the town of Raven's Fair. And earlier, Jamie said that in the town he's from, they are afraid of these dolls and they're like an omen, meaning he's also from Raven's Fair. As he drives through the town, we see almost all the shops are closed now. Jamie arrives at a large house behind a gated driveway. This is his father, who still lives in Raven's Fair. A young woman answers the door and introduces herself as his new stepmother, Ella. He dismissively walks past her to speak with his father, expecting a fight. But when he sees his father, he's shocked. His once strong and abusive father had a stroke a few months ago and is now in a wheelchair. He tries to explain to Jamie that he's a changed man and apologizes for everything and says he's sorry about Jamie's wife. He offers to take care of the funeral arrangements, but Jamie says, "That's alright, I got it. It's too late for charity now." He didn't come to talk about his wife anyway. He came to ask something. About a poem his mother used to read him. Edward immediately looks at his wife, but says, "What poem?" Jamie begins to recite it. "Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams," and his stepmother cuts him off. "Be sure you never, ever scream." She says it's just a story made up to scare kids, but Jamie says no, the adults believed in it too. His father tries to dismiss this as a small town superstition, but Jamie isn't buying it. If Jamie knew all this about Mary Shaw and the dolls, he should have taken it more seriously when one showed up at his door. He storms out of his father's house saying, "I have a funeral to prepare." His stepmother tries to stop him, and he points to a family portrait on the wall. Apparently, his father drove his mother to suicide and then had her painted out of the portrait. That's a little harsh. His second wife left him, and then he painted her out as well. So he's trying to get across the idea that he's been through a lot of women.
So it's a good thing you're gonna outlive him, lady. There'll be no one to paint you out.
Jamie stops at Walker's funeral home to make the arrangements for his wife, then goes back to the motel to sleep. With the dummy. There's a red pulsing sign outside making a loud buzzing noise. Just like what happened with Lisa, everything in the room begins to go silent, like a record player coming to a stop. Jamie's totally unaware and rolls over and hears someone call his name. When he opens his eyes, it's Billy. He jumps out of bed and Billy's now back where he's supposed to be. Jamie looks around the room terrified and sees a woman sitting in the corner. Oh no. The curtain from the window begins to blow and cover the woman. Then she instantly appears standing up and then right in front of Jamie. He quickly makes a dash for the light, and when he turns it on, everything is back to normal. Clearly Billy is possessed, and the old lady Jamie seen in his room must be Mary Shaw. First it was after his wife, and now it's after him. Every time someone is attacked, they go into a dreamlike state where everything goes silent. I don't think they're actually sleeping. Like I said, I think it's more of like a daydreaming scenario. By surviving the night, Jamie proves that you can survive these attacks. The key is not to scream, just like it says in the rhyme. The next thing we see is Lisa's body finally being brought to the funeral home in Raven's Fair. As soon as the mortician Henry opens up the bag, he is shocked.
No, it can't be.
It looks like he may have seen this before. He then hears a noise coming from the creepy crawl space. I wonder what that could be. Oh, it's actually just his wife, of course. His wife seems a little out of it and is rambling saying, "She's here now. She won't find me down here." She has a stuffed bird with her and keeps saying, "Silent time is here. Silent time is here." Henry gets his wife to go back to bed and takes a picture of Lisa's face for his records. We are now at Lisa's funeral. After this ceremony, Jamie sees Henry's wife Marion walking through the forest and follows her. He comes upon an overgrown grave and Marion pops up behind him saying, "Did you see her? Did you? She killed your wife. Did you see her do it?" Jamie is confused, saying, "Who killed my wife?" Marion continues, "Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams." Right before she can finish, her husband arrives saying, "Marion, leave him alone, this isn't the time." Marion continues to talk to Jamie as she's being pulled away, saying, "She's here. No one's safe. No one's safe." Henry tries to dismiss Marion, telling Jamie she doesn't know what she's saying. But I think we all know she's very aware of what's going on. If I had to guess, I would say Marion has had at least one run-in with Mary Shaw, and clearly it drove her insane. The last thing Marion says in the cemetery as she's being led away is, "You have to bury it." After Henry and his wife are gone, Jamie pulls the vines off the overgrown grave and reveals the name, Mary Shaw. He then quickly drives home, grabs the doll, then drives back to the cemetery. In the middle of the night, what could go wrong? On the way, Billy's eyes move and he looks at Jamie. Then we can hear humming, but when Jamie turns, the doll is back to normal. Jamie walks back to the grave of Mary Shaw with the doll. Behind her grave, there's dozens and dozens of small graves. These are for her dolls. Jamie starts looking through the dozens of headstones until he finds Billy. He digs up the ground, and as he does, we see the trees stop making noise, and Billy's mouth falls open. Jamie's now entering one of those dream sequences, meaning something bad is going to happen. He digs up the empty doll case and puts Billy inside. He questions, "Who would dig you up?" As he goes to put the lid on, Billy's head turns to look at Jamie. He says hell no and slams the case closed and gets back to his car. Smart decision. When he gets in his car though, shadows and figures start to move around the outside of the car, and we can hear what sounds like children laughing. Eventually he turns to the window and there's Billy standing outside the car, but he quickly disappears. Jamie gets out of the car and looks around, but there's nothing there. I actually don't know what's worse, being stuck in the car or being stuck outside of the car. Like if you're in the car and one of them pops up in the back seat, you're screwed, but then if you're locked out in the forest, that also you're kind of screwed, so. Jamie goes back to his motel and after coming out of the bathroom is greeted by Billy sitting on his bed. However, this is not a supernatural occurrence, it was brought by the detective. He was following Jamie and went and dug the doll back up. He wants to know why Jamie was trying to bury the doll. Because it's evidence in a capital crime, perhaps? Then he starts shaving his neckbeard. Who the hell walks around with a razor and starts shaving their face in the middle of a conversation?
Miss, she's not the only one that you came to bury.
Jamie tries to again explain he doesn't know who sent the doll, but he was just trying to put it back. There's a ghost story about a woman named Mary Shaw. She was buried with all her doll collection, and the story goes, make sure if you see her, you never scream. The detective cuts him off and says, "Or what?" Then he begins to laugh and says, "Oh, 'cause you'll end up without a tongue. I guess your wife didn't listen." This makes Jamie lose his temper and shove the cop, but then quickly recomposes himself after the detective threatens him with assaulting an officer. It seems like Jamie knows a hell of a lot more about Mary Shaw than he originally let on. Before leaving, the detective says he's going to take Billy with him. I'd be like, yeah, please do, go ahead. He then says, "Good night, neighbor." It takes Jamie a second to clue in, and then when he looks out the front door, the detective is staying in the room next to his. I guess he wants to keep an extra close eye on Jamie. The next day, Jamie waits until the detective leaves and then steals the doll back, then takes it to the Walker funeral home to speak with Marion, the girl he met in the cemetery. He holds up the doll and says, "Friend of yours?" Before she can say anything, Henry comes outside and tells Marion to go. As soon as he sees the doll, he says, "You're not supposed to have that." Where did you get that?" Jamie was hoping Henry could help him find that out. Henry tells him, "It belongs to her." Jamie says, "Who, Mary Shaw?" When he says this, Henry covers his mouth and says, "We don't say her name." So Mary Shaw is like Voldemort of Raven's Fair.
We do not speak his name.
Jamie tells Henry to try and say her name. It might help him figure out who killed his wife. Henry looks sympathetic to this and takes Jamie inside. He begins to tell a story and says, "There are things you remember and things you can't forget, like the look on that woman's face when she died. Her name was Mary Shaw, the ventriloquist who lost her voice. Back when I was a boy, those were the glory days of Raven's Fair.
And the town built itself a grand old theater, the Guignol Theater.
I only ever went there once." We then get to see a flashback of a show put on by Mary Shaw herself. According to her gravestone, she was born in 1869, and this show was taking place sometime in 1941, the same year she died. The show begins with a speaker saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be astounded. Prepare to be amazed. Witness Mary Shaw give life to the boy made of wood." She walks out on stage pulling a large trunk, but when she opens it, it's empty. Billy is hiding in the crowd, and we can hear him calling out. Mary Shaw yells back at Billy saying, "Where are you, Billy?" Mary Shaw then points to where young Henry is sitting and tells him to check under his seat. Sure enough, Billy is there. He brings the doll up on stage and the crowd applauds. She asks if the boy's name is Henry, and he just nods. She says, I guess my boy's had his eye on you. I wonder how she knew Henry's name. Could be a simple parlor trick. Or maybe not. She does a gag where Billy blows his nose and it looks real. Everything is going well. Until a young boy yells out, I can see your lips moving. The whole crowd goes silent. Mary Shaw looks out into the crowd and says, who said that? The boy continues to say, it's true, I can see your lips moving. Mary Shaw turns to the doll and says, what do you think of that, Billy? Young Michael doesn't think you're a real person, that you're a dummy, and I'm doing your voice for you. Billy seems to become upset by this and says, there's no way that's true. There's no way you'd give me all the good lines. Mary tells Billy to forget about him. There will always be doubters. But Billy says he doesn't want to forget. He wants to show the boy just how real he is. Bring him up here. The whole time Billy is saying this, Mary Shaw is arguing with the doll, and at times, their voices are overlapping, suggesting there's something more than ventriloquism going on here. The crowd begins to applaud, probably assuming Mary Shaw was doing this on purpose, but I'm not so sure she was. After the incident is over, she takes a long stare at the boy Michael and says one of her famous lines.
Now, who's the dummy?
We jump back to the present day now, and Henry says that just a few weeks later, that disbelieving boy went missing, gone without a trace. But Henry always felt that Mary Shaw played some role in it, and not long after that, she was murdered. Jamie wants to know who killed her, but Henry says no one ever found out. In Mary Shaw's will, she stated that her dummies were to be buried with her. Her children, as she called them. All 101 of them. Her body was brought to my father's mortuary, so he could begin on her final request. Not only did she ask to be buried with her dolls, she asked to become a doll herself. We see another flashback of a young Henry sneaking into his father's mortuary. He climbs up to get a better view of the body and accidentally knocks the casket over and the body lands on him. Ugh. When the light catches her face, she has been cut up to look like a ventriloquist doll, and it's pretty creepy. He backs up on the floor and suddenly her body disappears. Henry panics and looks around the room, and Mary Shaw is now standing, slowly hovering toward him with a huge smile. Lucky for him, he covers his mouth and doesn't scream, and a moment later his father enters the room, ending the incident. Ever since Mary Shaw was buried, Raven's Fair has been plagued by death. Families murdered. He hands Jamie some photos. They were found without their tongues, posed in family portraits. Jamie's wife's is the last. He wants to know who would send the dummy to him, but Henry says, I don't know. People in this town are afraid to speak her name, let alone go near her grave. They know she won't stop killing until the screaming does. A frustrated Jamie says he's gonna go check out that old theater on Lost Lake. That's where she lived. Henry warns him to be careful. If you go looking for answers, you just might find them. I haven't mentioned it yet, but this movie has a reoccurring piano theme, kind of like Halloween, and it's pretty good. Jamie drives to the theater and it's totally run down. He has to take a boat across the water because the bridge is now broken. Inside, there's bushes and trees growing through the floor and holes in the roof. Jamie enters the backstage area and sees this super rickety, dangerous metal walkway thing and decides he has to walk on it for some reason. He goes upstairs, and as he tries to walk across the runway, one of the bolts fall out, but it holds for now. I'm sure that won't come into play later. He enters the upper rooms where Mary Shaw lived and begins looking around. He finds a few dolls still there and posters of old performances. There's one trunk still on the ground, so Jamie opens it. Inside is a black book. As he pulls the book out, we see Mary Shaw in the mirror. He looks through the book and there's different designs for dummies and other ventriloquist contraptions. As he continues flipping through the pages, there's more drawings that look human. Almost like plans to make a human doll. Then on one page it says, to make the perfect doll. I wonder what that could mean. The next page has a picture of the boy that went missing from the theater. I wonder if she tried to make the missing boy into a doll. The paper says, young heir to family fortune missing. When Jamie Ashen looks closer at the photo, he sees a name. Michael Ashen. The boy who went missing was one of his ancestors. Jamie then hears something behind him, and when he looks up, there's a lady that looks like a zombie sitting in a chair. After this, he gets the hell out of there. Back at Henry's house, we hear his wife talking to someone in the other room. She says, what do you want with him? What is it? We put you in there with your family, all together. Why can't you just leave us alone? Why won't you? I didn't do anything. We then hear another voice say,
Yes, you did. You talked.
Marion becomes more frantic now, saying, I didn't talk. I didn't say anything. Henry overhears the talking and enters the room to check it out for himself and sees the doll Billy sitting in front of his wife. She says, why have you gone so quiet? Henry becomes furious and says, I'm putting you back where you belong, once and for all, and tells his wife to stop it because she keeps saying, he spoke to me. He takes the doll downstairs and he's looking around for something when Billy begins to look at him. Henry hears a noise from the crawl space where his wife likes to hide and assumes it's her, but I think we know better this time. As Henry is crawling into the crawl space, Billy fully turns his head now to look at Henry. Henry can hear what sounds like his wife sobbing and crying, but when he reaches what looks like her, it's just some junk that falls over. Just then, the door to the crawl space closes. Yeah, he's cooked. Henry starts to bang on the door when everything goes silent. He turns around to look into the darkness and now begins to panic, telling Marion to please open the door. From the darkness behind him, he hears something whisper his name. And when he points the light into the crawl space, he sees a pale hand on the wooden beam. As soon as he turns away from the hand, he's met face to face with Mary Shaw. He can't help it. He lets out a scream and she smiles with joy. She immediately lunges at him and he's left without a tongue. Henry is actually still momentarily alive. You can see his eyes moving. And Mary Shaw says, your voice is mine now, Henry. Then it looks like she eats his tongue, but her tongue also looks extremely long and like it's made of multiple tongues. It's like she eats them and the tongue gets added onto her tongue, I guess. So Henry is now dead, and after Jamie left the theater, he went straight to his father's house. Jamie says, I'm here to talk about Mary Shaw. You lied to me. I want the truth. What does Michael Ashen and our family have to do with Mary Shaw? His father, at first reluctant, calmly says, fine. When he was a boy, your great uncle, Michael Ashen, vanished without a trace. We see a quick shot of Michael in what looks like a straitjacket or something, screaming. His father, Edward, continues. For our family, there was only ever one suspect, Mary Shaw. So, they dealt their own justice. They forced her to scream and cut out her tongue. Their family, along with a few other families, are responsible for the killing of Mary Shaw. But she didn't stay dead. She came back and took revenge on each of the men involved. They were all found with their tongues ripped out. Then, it happened to their wives, their children, their children's children. His father says the only reason he sent Jamie away was to try and distance him from the curse. But after what happened to Lisa, he knew there was no running from their fate. Jamie says he's gonna try and stop this thing once and for all. On the way out of his father's house, he runs into the detective. He's looking for Jamie because he has some more questions, like where the puppet went. Oh yeah, forgot he stole that earlier. The detective then adds, yeah, all of his brothers and sisters are missing too. Jamie says, what are you talking about? And we see that the detective went to the cemetery and dug up all the other graves, and every single one was empty. The detective wants to know who dug them up and why. And he says, don't bring up a ghost story about some lady that pulls out your tongue because no one in this town has ever heard of Mary Shaw or your little fairy tale. Jamie tries to tell him it's because they are afraid, because they believe in Mary Shaw. Henry did say earlier that most people in the town are too afraid to even speak her name, so that checks out. The detective tries to arrest Jamie for stealing evidence, aka the doll, but a phone call comes in for him at the house. It's Henry. He's breaking up but says, I can prove it. I can prove you didn't kill her. There's a way. At the theater. Meet me at the theater. We know Henry is dead, so that couldn't have been him. I guess that's what Mary Shaw meant when she said, your voice is mine. When she takes someone's tongue, she is able to use their voice. That would also explain how Jamie heard his wife talking even though she was already dead. Jamie says he has to go to the theater, but the detective still wants to arrest him. He tries to explain that Henry is at the theater and can prove I didn't kill my wife. The detective still doesn't want to hear it though, so Jamie, feeling like he has no choice, runs from him and goes straight to the theater. It's his best chance at ending this curse and hopefully clearing his name at the same time. Jamie arrives at the theater and enters, looking for Henry. The detective is not far behind. He grabs his shotgun and also enters the theater by boat. Since the footbridge to the theater is broken, it's like Hogwarts Year 1 and you have to take a boat to get to the entrance. Who builds a theater in the middle of a swamp lake?
That wouldn't cut the mustard on location, would it?
You can't live like that, can you?
While Jamie's looking around, he calls out to Henry. and Henry's voice from above says, "Come on, Jamie, I'm up here." He follows the voice up to the top floor, across that sketchy bridge again. And it holds up again, okay. He continues to hear Henry's voice leading him deeper into the Grand Theater. That's when the detective finally catches up to Jamie. "Let's go, Henry's not in here." That's when they both hear a raspy voice say,
Yes, he is.
The detective heard the voice too, so now he's kinda believing Jamie. They go to the back of the room where they heard the voice, and Jamie hears Billy humming. It's almost like they're leading him somewhere. He tells the detective to hold the lamp and finds a narrow entrance that blends in with the wall. They enter into a kind of special doll making area for Mary Shaw. The detective sees a dummy on the ground and picks it up and says, "If I see one more of these things," and throws it behind him. The dummy hits a curtain, knocking it down, revealing a massive display case full of Mary Shaw's dolls. They're all here, but who brought them? The detective then sees something in the middle of the room, covered with a red sheet, and says, "What's that?" Jamie approaches it and pulls the sheet off to reveal something horrifying. The detective says, "Is that a doll?" Jamie looks closer. It's not a doll. It's a boy. I think we just solved a 70-year-old missing persons case. Long lost relative. This is Michael Ashen. So that confirms that Mary Shaw did in fact kill Michael, so it wasn't just some kind of witch hunt. Not only did she kill him, she turned him into her first human doll. As they are looking at Mary Shaw's handiwork, we hear what sounds like a record player being slowed down. Then the room is completely silent. Jamie says, "This is how it always starts." They look at the wall to see all the dolls start to look the same direction, one by one. When they look where all the dolls are looking, there's a single clown doll sitting in a rocking chair outside the cabinet. The two approach the doll, and when Jamie says, "Mary Shaw," the doll stops moving and says, The detective still has no idea what's going on and yells, "Show yourself." Jamie asks what she wants, and the doll says, "To silence all those who silenced me." He wants to know if that's why she killed Michael Ashen. Mary says, "So hard to construct the perfect doll. Sometimes you have to use existing parts." We then see a flashback of Mary using Michael like a doll, pretending he was one of her children. Jamie wants to know, why Lisa? After all, she isn't even in his bloodline. The doll says, "Come closer and I'll tell you." The detective immediately shakes his head and says, "Don't go back there. Don't go." I'm with him. I wouldn't be getting any closer to a puppet that looks like a clown that can talk. It speaks again and says, "Come closer and I'll whisper it to you." Surprisingly, the doll doesn't just immediately attack him. Mary Shaw says, "You weren't the last Ashen. The last Ashen was inside her." Jamie had no idea his wife was pregnant, and that's one hell of a way to find out. From a puppet clown. Gender reveal featuring Mary Shaw's puppet clown. Mary Shaw's giant tongue then comes through the puppet and licks Jamie's face, causing him to jump back. The puppet begins to laugh maniacally, when suddenly 2 hands shoot out of the darkness and grab the puppet by the head. It stops laughing, and the arms lift the puppet into the air. The shot of Mary Shaw sticking her tongue through the puppet is disgusting. The detective shoots the puppet with his shotgun, causing Mary Shaw to momentarily disappear. But then, she starts trying to come through all the other dolls. Jamie realizes that she's living through the dolls, like possession. Remember when I said she's like Voldemort because you can't say her name? Well, turns out she also has Horcruxes, which are these dolls. Even though she is dead, her soul or spirit lives on through the dolls. The detective continues to shout what the hell is going on while shooting the dolls as they come to life. Jamie just yells at him to keep shooting the dolls, all the dolls. Jamie then throws his lamp onto them, catching the whole cabinet on fire. Well, that should do it. Oh wait, behind them is the doll of Michael Ashen, and behind him stands Mary Shaw. The two try to run away from her. Oh no, the rickety bridge. Can it hold up to one more crossing? Nope. As they cross it, it finally breaks, and the detective goes right over the edge. Well, at least he didn't get killed by Mary Shaw. Whoa, what the hell? That's not fair. He yelled because he fell, not because she scared him. That should be cheating. I do like that she was like, nope, you're not allowed to fall to your death. So she saves him just to murder him. Also, I liked the dynamic between Jamie and the detective. I kinda wish the detective would have been in more of the movie, helping Jamie investigate Mary Shaw. I think that would have been pretty cool. And he has just the right amount of comedic relief, especially when they're going through the theater. It's not too much, but just enough. Jamie tries to climb up to safety, but is met face to face with Mary Shaw and falls off the walkway. As he falls, he almost screams, but manages to grab his mouth just in time. He breaks through the floor and lands in the water below. He swims out of the theater and we see it going up in flames behind him. Well, that should be all of them. However, he remembers something. Billy wasn't there. There's still one left. He goes back to Henry's house where he left the doll. He goes downstairs and finds Marion holding her husband's body with his tongue ripped out. He asks her who took the dummy, and she says, Mr. Ashen. Jamie is confused and says, my father's in a wheelchair. He never leaves the house. Marion says, he left this house. He had the doll. It was him. Jamie immediately rushes over to his father's house to get to the bottom of this. He enters the house, and when he reaches the top of the stairs, we hear the clock come to a stop. Here we go. He walks down the dark hallway and into one of the rooms, looking for the doll. He hears the detective's voice say, why did you bury me, Jamie? Then another voice say, I'm over here. He finds the doll under a blanket, and as soon as he picks it up, Mary Shaw lunges at him from behind the curtains. He thinks quickly and throws Billy into the fireplace, again stopping her for now. He takes a moment to breathe, then realizes his father is in the room. He turns the light on and tries to talk to him, but he falls forward lifelessly. As Jamie looks at the back of his dad's head, he is speechless. The back of his head has been hollowed out and there's a ventriloquist device in there. A device we actually see in Mary Shaw's book. Jamie has a flashback realizing what's been going on. Ella, his father's new wife, was controlling him the entire time. His father was nothing but a puppet. Now that we see the flashbacks, he never talked without Ella by his side. We then see her black book with all the drawings in it, and where it says, to make the perfect doll, is on a little flap of paper. And when it's pulled to the side, it reveals Ella. She is the perfect doll that Mary Shaw was trying to make, and did make. Jamie turns around to see Ella standing there.
Now, who's the dummy?
Jamie held out as long as he could, but this revelation is too much for him and he screams. The film ends with us seeing Jamie, his wife, the detective, Henry, his father, and Ella in Mary Shaw's black book. As we see the photos, Jamie repeats the rhyme one last time. Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams, be sure you never, never scream. Okay, there's still a few things I want to talk about, and first off is the alternate ending. I didn't even know this movie had an alternate ending until I went to make this video, so you learn something new every day. In the alternate ending, instead of Ella immediately killing Jamie, she knocks him unconscious and ties him up. When he wakes up, she is talking to him in many different voices. She says that in the beginning of their marriage, it was the same. Jamie's father was quite abusive and he even put her in the hospital once. One day Mary Shaw came to her. Then she went to her grave and dug up Billy. When she did this, she basically became possessed by Mary Shaw, but willingly so. So in this ending, it explains who dug up Billy, and in this version, Ella is not the perfect doll, but a possessed human. She also said that I gave you a chance. All you had to do was be a good boy, but you couldn't. What does that mean? Does that mean she might have let him live? The very last thing we see is Mary Shaw posing them in front of a camera for a family portrait, just like those other photos that Henry had. After the photo, it looks like Jamie is dead, but he doesn't have his tongue ripped out. Ella is telling him a story, and she is also doing the voice of Jamie, pretending he is her child, like Michael Ashen. Honestly, I think the alternate ending is better. It reveals how Billy got dug up in the first place, and more importantly, it shows how and why exactly Ella was chosen and possessed by Mary Shaw. I had to source the footage for the alternate ending from YouTube because it was extremely difficult to find and I literally could not find it anywhere else. You can even see by the text on the screen this isn't even a proper release of the alternate ending. It's from production and might still have needed some VFX added. A loose end of this movie that I think should have been clarified is why Mary Shaw was treating the dolls like her children. Was it because she couldn't have kids? Was it because her kids died somehow? We'll never know. If we had found out that her children were killed somehow or that she couldn't have kids, then it would make sense why the dolls are like her children, but it never really clarifies why she has this relationship with the dolls. Another thing I wanted to talk about was Henry's death. As far as I know, his family was not involved in the killing of Mary Shaw. However, we did hear Marion talking to Billy, which we now know is just Mary Shaw, and he said she did do something. She talked. So presumably Henry was killed because Marion was talking to Jamie. This explained why no one in Raven's Fair wanted to give the detective any information, and why Henry said that no one even likes to speak her name, because even talking about Mary Shaw could get you killed. At the very beginning of the film, it gives us some history about ventriloquists. It says, in the 6th century BC, it was believed that the spirits of the dead would speak through the stomach region of the living. From the Latin word venter, for belly, and loqui, to speak, hence the word ventriloquist. This could be inferring that those that are able to perform ventriloquism may have extraordinary abilities when it comes to the dead. Maybe that's how Billy was able to overtalk Mary Shaw. Rather than her always performing the voices, something else was. I have to be honest though, I think it would have been a little more interesting if we found out that Mary Shaw was not the one who killed Michael Ashen. Then it would have given her a justified reason to kill everyone. It's kind of hard to feel any type of sympathy for her when she murdered a child and turned him into a puppet. I think if they killed her unjustly, and then for revenge she came back and was turning them into puppets, that would make more sense. Nonetheless, the story of Mary Shaw and Raven's Fair is very enjoyable, and has stuck with me for nearly 20 years.
Be sure you never, ever scream.
That's my video on Dead Silence from 2007. I won't say it's an underrated movie because I think a lot of people have heard of it by now, but I do think it's an underappreciated movie. It's about dummies, so it's gonna be a little wacky, but I like that about the film. It's made by the creators of Saw and Insidious, so these guys know what they're doing. I also really like the cast. I thought Jamie was good, Henry was good, the detective, and of course Mary Shaw. I would probably say Judith Roberts stole the show as Mary Shaw. I really like that theater sequence for some reason. Anyway, if there's any other movies or TV shows you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments down below. I have a few ideas that I'm excited about, but I'm always looking for new movies and series I haven't heard of. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. It helps the channel and I really appreciate it. As always, an extra shout out to all my members for supporting the channel. Many of you have been with the channel for over a year and I can't tell you how much that means. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.